Hi, in this video we button up the switches, complete the fan install, build the back door, install trim on the outside walls, build a fridge slide, and much more. Welcome to Life in Color. I'm Rick and this is Jim. Okay, the final installation of the dimmer switch and the cabin light switches are done. That is for the up top lights, and you can make them brighter or you can make them darker, which I think is going to be awesome because it's nice to come in when you're doing something and have them nice and bright, and you can pop them up to do that, or then you can bring them down if you want to play cards or whatever it is, play on your laptop, whatever. That's the outside lights, that's the inside lights, and that is the outside lights. Now all it's left to do here is to screw in the Maxxfan controller, and I haven't decided where to put that, but I'll figure that out. I'm thinking right here by the window. It was really simple. I installed the bracket to hold the remote control for the Maxxfan, popped the batteries in, and that was about all there was to it. It instantly powered up, and I was able to control the fan right there and then. And that's all there is to it. There's a little metal clip that needs to be aligned, and they're pretty easy to do. And then basically you just screw the screws in, make sure you're getting through the plastic and into the metal clip, and you're off to the races. It's really straightforward. It's literally you're seeing me do it, and I'm not smart, so there you go. You can see that the depth is about 2 inches, that the inside flange reaches to get to the top of the fan, Maxxfan fan on the outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the 2 inches down here, and then I'm going to do the cut to cut it to size to fit nice and properly in the slot that's available. Used the good old trusty reciprocating saw, and I used a fine metal bit, Diablo I think is what I was using at the time, and you just take your time, go slow. I cut a little wider, I think I was up to about 2 1/4, and just took my time and worked my way around. Nothing complicated there at all. I gave it a quick sanding just to make sure that there was no sharp edges, and I buy those sanding blocks. I think they're like 80 grit, and they work great. And it was time to use butt end connectors. I used the silicone ones that you heat up and they become waterproof, and I think I'm using 12 or 14 gauge wire here. It should be plenty. A couple of spots on the roof had lifted slightly. I don't know if I used enough VHB tape or what the real problem was, but the easy solution was to drill it and to apply some pop rivets to hold the roof down in those spots. So just pressing down hard, getting the pop rivet to the machine to get a grasp, and then crushing it home. And it worked great. It seemed to, we don't have leaks. If you watched the previous video, Jen had used some substandard 3/8 inch Home Depot plywood to build a box for the fridge and the slide.
and to be honest with you, it was super flimsy and it wasn't going to stand up. So she went back to the drawing board. She used 1/2 inch plywood, really nice maple, and she used some heavy aluminum L brackets that we had left over from making brackets for the 80/20, and you know, did a really heavy duty job of making the fridge slide, and it actually turned out really well. We've used it now for a couple of camping trips, and I'll be posting those videos in a couple of weeks, and yeah, you'll get to see it working, and it's fantastic. I'm really impressed. Well, it was time for me to build the back door, and I have to admit I went into it with a lot of what I call trepidation. I was somewhat concerned because I'd never built one before and didn't really know what I was doing, and you know, was concerned about screwing it up. Steel's expensive, and so anyway, I took my time, came up with a plan, and basically I measured the outside dimensions of the trailer, and then designed the door to go to the outside edges of the trailer, which is probably the wrong thing to do, but it's what I did. From there, once I had cut the steel, which is a little tricky because I think the saw blade I believe it's a 14-inch blade, and it had shrunk over time. I did a fair bit of cutting, and so I had to flake each piece off. Once I had cut the 2 pieces of steel that ideally to the exact same length, I clamped them together, and then I used a flapper disc on an angle grinder, and I made them as absolutely even as possible so that I could make the back door as square as possible. Then I had the brilliant idea of doing this on the table so I didn't have to bend over, and you can watch the hilarity that ensued as I put magnets and clamps on them, and they fell on the ground and fell on the ground again, and being stubborn or stupid, I finally gave up, and you'll see that it's back on the floor. I got to use the magnets, got Jen to help me. We got it as square as possible. I'm not 100% positive the floor is perfectly square, and you know, with welding you have to make sure that you weld the outside and then the inside, and you have to do spot for a while to make the door perfectly flat. And to be honest with you, I think I've got about a 4-inch bow in my door from one side to the other, but it seems to hold just fine. Like I said, I've used it on a couple of trips now, and it's holding well. Here you can just see, and I've got it back up on the table because I tack welded it, and now I'm just doing the fill-in welds. It went really well. I'm starting to get the hang of the welder now, and how far away I should be holding the gun from the actual steel, and how slow I should be going. So the welding is getting a lot better. Here I just used the flapper again just to clean up the edges, check my welds, and now I am using core seal to prime and seal in the steel from rust. And here we are, just doing a quick test fit on the back door to see how it's going to look. I went back to my trusty metal supply shop, and I had him cut an aluminum 4x8 sheet into 2-inch strips, and then I had him use a brake and fold those strips into those 2-inch strips by 8 feet into basically L brackets, 1-inch L brackets, and this is what we planned on using for the trim for the outside of the trailer. You can see here I'm using a rattle can and some Rust-Oleum, and now you can see here that I'm sanding off all the paint that I put on. I actually ended up having to sand them back and then prime them with a primer and then spray them again, and it still doesn't look that great. I'm not that impressed with the work I did. Here you can see Jen's installing the trim, and it looks great. We used a product called Sikaflex. I bought a couple bottles of it to do the windows, to make sure that I got a really good seal on the windows, and the stuff's great. It's very malleable. It stays that way for a long time. It does stiffen up, and basically you run. I pumped it into the cracks of the joints of where the material was, and then I got Jen to run a bead down both sides of the trim, and then to basically stick it on and hold it into place for a few seconds, and that's the end of it. It is amazing. This piece here, again, because the roof was short by about 2 inches, I used some leftover checker plate, and then what we did is I actually used a press to spread the aluminum and mounted it. Here you can see Jen is again putting Sikaflex into the join where the roof panel and the side panel meets before she's going to put the trim on the trailer. She's just pumping it full of Sikaflex. And then she applies the trim, and she's got a real touch for it. So it's a real pleasure having her help me with this project, because to be honest with you, after all the sanding and resanding and respraying, I was ready to throw the towel in on this project. I'm really lucky to have someone like Jen as a partner to help me with the finicky projects that really I'm not great at. I bought the Hurricane hinge from Vintage Technologies in, I think it's Illinois, and here you can see I've drilled holes into the steel, through the LU panel and into the steel, and then I'm using a pop rivet gun to mount that to the roof. I did put a couple of bolts in at the end, screwed them directly into the steel, so I got some really, because the door is quite heavy, and it was actually bending the aluminum. So here you can see how it's going to look with the door, and I'm just screwing the, actually I used pop rivets on the other side as well for the door.